Calling to order the meeting of the Zoning Bylaw Study Committee today, Monday, September 13th at 5:13 p.m. This evening we will be reviewing and discussing the draft TDR bylaw and the TDR overlay map for sending and receiving areas. We've cut it a little tight on our members here tonight. Everybody's pretty busy with the beginning of school and everything that's been going on, so we'll do our best to get through this. All right. Any preferences where we start? Is everybody satisfied with the map? It looks pretty much like what we put together. I don't see any changes or...
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I remember at the last meeting, I had given Helen Zinkovich from Serped a bunch of map and parcel numbers for other areas in town that I thought should be sending areas. I did send those to her. It was pretty big documents, and I don't know if she's planning on coming back again, I hope. But there would be some significant area, primarily in South Carver, although there are a couple other portions. And they're just areas that, unless you know they're there, you don't know they're there. It doesn't make much sense. Some of them belong to growers that have lots of acres of land. And even when you subtract the cranberry bogs, we still make a lot of acres. So I'm hoping we're not finished with this map. Hopefully we can bring that back to us at some point and see what the committee thinks of it.
We'd have to check with Jim, but I think we've pretty much...
She did say to send them to her, and I have not.
Okay.
She got them, I just haven't heard back.
I think we've run out. Oh, we're running very low on the credits with...
Right, so our contract that we're operating with is complete, but they did say that, some minor edits they might be able to work in. So our contract with Serped is complete, but they did say if there are just a few minor tweakings, they might be able to handle that. But I'll follow up too, also with Helen. Did you send that in an email to her?
I had to send them in multiple emails, and even then the files were zipped. I'm happy to forward those to you.
Okay, and then that way, at least that way I'm aware of which ones were sent to her.
For sure. Okay.
Right, because I never saw it, so I'm not familiar with the parcels. I'm gonna guess they're...
She just said to send to her, and I was assuming she would put them on the map for future discussion.
I'm gonna guess they're in the wetlands south and east of Route 58 Tremont Street?
They are, but that's not all wetlands.
Okay.
So there's about 900 acres in there, but a lot of which is upland. And if you look at the assessor's card and subtract the cranberry bogs, probably 600 or 700 acres. There's another parcel. There's just a few. I just was looking for something that things that were over 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a parcel. Looks blank right here, but it's behind. I guess that's a Bonds Estate. Yeah, it's got blank land behind this one here. That's about 600 acres.
Okay.
So
Is it off Bunny's Road?
It is.
Bunny's Road?
Mm-hmm. But you can get to it off Pond Street as well.
Oh, is that large, it's a Makepeace tract of land?
It is. I wasn't going to mention landowners.
Well, it helps me because I know that's, they refer to it as a Swan Hope Bog Complex.
So I hope. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But again, all of these parcels, when you subtract the acreage cranberry bog, there's still significant land that remains.
Now, didn't we at some point discuss that particular property, Jim? I thought I know it was separate. Bunny's Road separates the two properties at some point.
But if you look at the map, you can access it off Pond Street. Bunny's Road is a really bad access point. But so this is Pond Street right here, and you can get to it through there as well.
Right, it's off Wenham Road, can also access off of Pond Street. And then it backs up to the neighborhood where Wade Street is. And,
on the state center.
yep.
Connie, I can send this to you too if you want.
Yeah, sure. Right. Well, we're pretty short on people tonight. I mean, we can make changes, but it'd certainly be better if we all understood
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, I wouldn't expect anyone to not.
where we could pull them up on the map and take a look at them.
Absolutely.
Are these things you're proposing because you'd like them to be sending areas?
That's what I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've-
Right, I mean, some of them, I mean, it certainly should be considered, because there's a lot of land down there. And it's, you know, there's a lot of wet, but there's also some upland as well.
And how does everybody feel? Do we feel that we've covered the receiving areas available to current or future water supply? Do we cover those, because I honestly can't think of any other areas available through the public water supply system. And I think that's part of the requirement in this, if I'm not mistaken, for the increased density. Alright. Has everybody had a chance to read through the proposed TDR transfer development bylaw draft that we've put together?
Yes.
So what was that last statement that you said? You said, Connie, that you had to have public water supply
I think all the TDRs have to be within accessible reach or potential future development for the water supply, and that's why nothing was in South Carver. It was all, you know, there was some in the center of town, but the majority of it was up near the North Carver Water District or surrounding area there where potentially either water currently exists or they're looking to put it in. It has been discussed at some point.
'Cause I
You
think-
know as well as I that certain proposals have come through to extend the water supply to certain areas, and I think we've kind of restricted it to that because with the increased development on the land, for instance, if we're looking at putting up to 10 units on 3.5 acres in order to properly septic the development, it'd have to have some sort of clean water supply. So I don't see that we could get 10 houses on 3.5 acres with both a well and a septic system in regards to that.
That's kind of part of the problem solved for the developer, you know, so if they wanted to, so yes, you have permission to get up to a certain density level, but if you can't do that and at the same time provide safe water supply as well as handle the septic, then you wouldn't be able to get the maximum density of that site. Because, you know, at this point, I don't think there's any plans to extend water service except for maybe within the North Carver Water District,
Right.
which already exists.
I'm sorry.
Except for the North Carver Water District, where up in North Carver, you have the North Carver Water District that exists, and then any higher density developments within that district, that potentially could be a water supply for those houses.
Yeah, but the reason I ask is I don't remember talking about that, but maybe, I think I missed one meeting, but it says here, the receiving area development plan shall show all existing legal restrictions, easements, or limitations on development.
What section are you on?
Oh, this is 27XX,
Page 8.
and it's like the second paragraph up, right above 2750 TDR special permit criteria. It says the receiving parcel shall have a public water and public septic service available, or said services shall be provided as part of the TDR special permit development approval package.
Treatment plans can meet this requirement.
Yeah, so I was kind of wondering.
I see,
I get that, I mean, so, as
We have
Jim
no-
said, I was wondering if you could do wells and septic, would that be under the special permit?
That's what it sounds like to me.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
You can get special.
Right.
Bruce, can you say again which section you're reading from? Is
It's
it-
on page 8,
Okay,
and it's 27XX at the
Okay.
bottom of 27XX. Because I know we do have concentrated development like on Santana Way with the condominiums there. And at first, when those were proposed, they were gonna do the public water. But then it turned out they did wells there and they could fit it in. I mean, of course, all this has to go through the Board of Health.
Yeah.
If they couldn't have fit it in, then if it didn't work, then they would have had to go with the public water. But the line would have had to be extended, I believe.
They kind of, I know they have septic systems that if they're designed a certain way can treat a lot of stuff on a small area.
Right, yeah, I mean, yeah, so there are different ways to do it, so it's sort of like, to me, I mean, looking at this paragraph, it's kind of up to, whether it can be done or not.
Do you know why they didn't connect to public water on Santana Way? I know it's off topic, but I'm just curious.
The reason I don't know, Jim could say, but I guess it was the cost or something. What, do you remember,
well,
Jim?
so that was approved before I started working for the town. So my understanding that it was supposed to be hooked into public water.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it still is. I know there was a time something came up, there was an issue about the, what do they call it, the sign up or hookup fees. And the developer was gonna go to individual wells, but I don't know if he came back to do that, so.
Oh, I
sorry.
thought that he did.
Is
But
There was
Santana
talk
Way
about
off
it.
of High Street?
it's in back of Cumberland Farms.
It's off Plymouth
Oh,
Street.
okay, yep,
Yeah.
okay. That used to be the old Middleborough line that we closed that off and now it's the North Carver water supply line.
Yeah, but the New Car Wash Plant is not currently run down from the street. I mean, that's my understanding.
Behind Cumberland Farms? I thought the old Middleborough water supply line came through there. And that we've shut off the Middleborough, we no longer take Middleborough water.
Well, there may have been some houses, but as far as I know, it doesn't run down Plymouth Street. And I don't think they didn't want it to run down Plymouth Street. Residents.
Now, this section we're talking about, do we need to clarify who is to provide the services? I don't want it misconstrued that the town might be responsible for
Well, yeah.
these costs.
I mean, obviously, we don't have any public septic. I mean, you can do a treatment plant.
But it does say public, which I get Connie's
Yeah.
point, that sounds kind of like the town was supplied.
Right. No, I understand. And,
Yeah, page 8, shall follow, bottom 27,
And then
Second paragraph from the bottom, Chuck.
And then it's, I still don't know if you have to have public water here, or if a well works on the site, or several wells work on the site, would that be allowable under this?
Well, actually, maybe you can add a word it says, the second sentence of that final paragraph, it says, the receiving parcel shall have public water and public septic services available, or said services shall be provided, and then you insert the word privately, as part of the TDR special permit development proposal, approval.
Excellent.
Does that work for people?
I would accept a motion in that regards.
Privately by the developer?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
better.
I don't want to see the town be on the hook or any sort of legal challenge in regards to that.
So privately by the developer, after provided. I'll second that motion.
So that was
I need
moved,
somebody,
moved by Sarah, second by,
no, nobody's made the motion.
Oh, no
I'll
one's
make,
made the
I'll
motion.
make the motion to insert the words privately by the developer after the words shall be provided.
And then I think we should also add, to the last sentence, there, package treatment plans can meet this requirement. We should also add package treatment plans provided by the developer.
I think that would be in,
Whatever is,
well, said services shall be provided privately by the developer would cover all of that.
That would privately financed.
that referred to the second sentence. Connie, I'm talking about the third sentence, the last sentence of that paragraph. Package treatment plans provided privately by the developer can also meet this requirement. I mean, I don't want to imply that the town has to provide a package treatment. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep. Alright, so maybe we want to insert the word privately after the word provided in the said paragraph, and also make it private private should be inserted as the first word in the next sentence, if that's,
all right, let's
I
do,
think they should both read privately by the developer, just to make it really clear.
so the first one, said services shall be provided privately by the developer as part of the TDR special permit development approval.
I think that covers
Right, and then
both
the-
services.
and then the last
I
sentence-
agree. It says the receiving parcel shall have public water and public septic services available, or said services shall be provided privately by a developer.
Right,
I don't
and-
know if we really need to
Yeah.
put it at the end.
So you think it's okay just to leave the package
Uh,
treatment plans can meet this requirement?
Well, just
So
that's
amended?
that's not a part of the legal requirement. I think that's more of a suggestion if the town doesn't have its own septic, that the developer is required to provide it.
But you don't think it's important to put that in?
I don't see it's
See, I think it's
I don't.
really, really important.
I don't.
If we're trying to be really crystal clear, I think it should be in there.
All right.
I mean, it's not gonna hurt.
No, it wouldn't hurt. No.
So you could say private treatment plants, oh, it says private treatment plants, so we have to make a,
No, I would just insert it after plans, privately by the developer can meet this requirement. Same phrase as in sentence 2.
all right, but package treatment plans, or is it supposed to read
I
plants?
think it should say plans.
I would say too, yeah.
All right, and then, so the language you use, so, Sarah, you said package treatment plants, then you said insert blank after that?
Privately provided by the developer can meet this requirement.
Or I think maybe provided by the developer might be sufficient.
Yeah, that's
All right, so we're gonna have that privately, provided by the developer?
Provided by the developer can meet this requirement.
Okay, yeah.
And so that would go after plants. So just to go over again, packaged treatment plants provided by the developer can meet this requirement.
Correct.
Okay. Then,
And then could you just give me a synopsis on the previous one?
so, go back to B. The receiving parcels shall have public water and public septic services available, or said services shall be provided privately by the developer as part of the TDR special permit development approval.
Well, that sounds good. I would be more than willing to accept a motion in regards to those changes.
So do you want to remake your motion now?
Yeah, I would
Oh,
just,
it wasn't, well, you'd have to rescind it because, or remake it.
I'll amend the original
Okay,
motion
there you go.
to include the language just summarized by Jim Walsh.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any further discussion? All right, I like the roll call vote, so Mr. Holmes?
Adam Holmes says aye.
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Cornelia Shea says aye.
Terry Gibbons says aye.
Jeff Farley says aye.
Thank you, that was a very good catch, Bruce.
Hillwinds and Red Death. Those are all yes.
If I could, Mr. Chair, too.
Yes, please.
One other thing I noticed before the meeting that I mentioned to Jim, you may have overheard me, was in section 27XX on page 2, section B, for the uses permitted on receiving parcels. Multifamily dwellings containing no more than 8 dwelling units per building. My personal preference would be to restrict that to 5, just because I don't think anything more than 5 is allowed in our current zoning bylaw.
Okay, yeah.
And I think,
Tell us where we can.
yep, on page 2, in section B, it's under 27XX, permitted uses on sending and receiving parcels.
Now, that would limit it to, that would fall into the townhouses, wouldn't that, Jim?
Right. Well, you
My-
could have 5, you could have 5 apartments that are not townhouses.
Okay,
My concern would be if we have something in here that says you can build multifamily dwellings with up to 8 dwelling units per building, then we're gonna have somebody come in and says, I wanna do, 7 family dwellings, and that's not allowed in our zoning bylaw. So we're back to where we were with the townhouse definition 5 months ago, where they were approving and building things that weren't allowable in the bylaw.
right, but I just need some clarification here. In 7 family, multifamily dwellings are not allowable in our bylaw. I'm not familiar with that. I know the townhouse bylaw is specific for 3 to 5, but multifamily houses,
But there's nothing else for multifamily. It's either,
I don't recall a permitted
Yeah,
use of anything more than 5 dwelling units in anywhere in the zoning bylaw. So that's part of the reason why I asked Jim if he knew of it.
no, I just
You can
trying
do
to
one
find out, because
family,
I don't recall it either.
right, you can do 1 family, you can do 2 family or duplex, but that's by a special permit. And then the next layer down is the townhouse development bylaw,
Which is
which
3 to
is the
5.
3 to 5 units, per building. But nothing comes up that would allow apartments, other than its accessory use above commercial, but then, that has its own set of rules.
Totally different, right?
Okay, all right, because that was part of my concern was, the little mall down here, let's say they wanted to put up 6 apartments over that,
So there's,
are we gonna be restricting from that?
well, there's a formula in the current bylaw that addresses the accessory dwelling units over
Okay,
commercial.
all right,
And you're given a base amount, which I think is 2, and then you're allowed additional units, but it's based on what's allowable, or you have to use TDR credits in order to get those additional units.
okay, all right, that's what I'm looking for. So, number 3 here, multifamily dwellings containing no more than 8 dwelling units per building. Basically, that's referring to apartment buildings, correct?
Right.
And there's nothing in our,
Currently, there's nothing in our bylaw that allows kind of multifamily
so we'd be opening
apartments.
a big can of worms in the fact that we would have to develop.
A bylaw to
The
That would
covers.
allow-
Accommodate this,
Yeah,
We theoretically can strike number 3 completely from it because everything else falls under either townhouse or condominium.
right, right.
Could do that too, yeah.
Yeah, I would rather see that than reconstructing more sections of,
Yeah.
you know, red tape and trouble. Mr. Holmes, would you have a motion in regards to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I move that we, in section 27XX, permitted uses on sending and receiving parcels, section B, I, 3, remove the entire number 3, which says multifamily dwellings containing no more than 8 dwelling units per building, be stricken from the TDR bylaw.
I'll second that.
Second that. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll move to a roll call vote, Mr. Holmes.
Adam Holmes says aye.
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Cornelia Shea says aye.
Sarah Ewan says aye.
Jack Martin says aye.
And, Mr. Chair, I was just gonna say, maybe we should also like for the whole committee to really,
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
I
I
agree.
most
Yeah,
certainly,
I agree.
yes, and, yeah, absolutely. No, but, we're here, we have a work team available, and we can, and review these changes before, and that'll give everybody a chance to vote on it. I had another question on this. For any receiving area, I'm sorry, I'm on page 6, step 3R. Calculate the affordable housing requirement. For any receiving area development of 5 or more units, a minimum of 20% of the housing units constructed in a receiving area that generated from the application of TDR credits. So we're talking if there's going to be 5 or more units on the property, there's a requirement of 20% there. But then, I'm sorry, on page 6, step 3R. Now, we're requiring it of 5 or more units, but then we're giving bonus units in regards to it, so I'm not entirely certain how that's working. I figured if, because it seems to me, we look at the Newler calculation of 3.5 acres in the chart with the receiving area maximum development potential of 10 units. Now we're requiring it, but then we're giving them 2 bonus units on top of it, so I'm not entirely certain.
is that because they're affordable?
I believe it's, yeah, they have affordable housing requirement, so
Well,
I think,
If I'm not mistaken, the way the current zoning is now, not everything has an affordable housing requirement. It's just those things existing now that require a special permit, like conservation subdivisions, townhouses.
conservation, yeah, we all, 10%, I think it pretty much,
So I guess my point is, if we want it required under this special permit, I think we do have to say it.
well, basically what I'm asking is if they're required, I mean, even if we stayed with the standard 10% where they have to give 1 unit,
But my point is, it's not standard.
right,
So it's only spelled out, correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, but my memory is that it's only required under certain special permits because they say so.
Right, because for the conservation subdivision, the townhouse development, there's a couple that are not usable, but the neighborhood, I forgot the actual name of it, planned neighborhood development, which is not usable because there's no TDR program right now. What are the other requirements? There's,
That they all spell it out in the special permit requirement. So it's not just something that these folks would automatically have to do.
Right, but my question then becomes, out of the 10 units that we allow, 20% of those have to be affordable. I mean, according,
Only if
To-
you spell it out in this bylaw.
but that's what I'm saying, it is spelled out.
Okay.
It says, for any receiving area development of 5 or more units, a minimum of 20% of the housing units constructed in the receiving area.
And that's true for,
That's two of, but then now it's not 10 units anymore, now it's 12 units. I mean, we're changing numbers. If it was 30 units, is it gonna be 36 units? Or is it gonna be 24 units and 6 affordable? I mean, that's kind of the,
Changing the housing constructed in the receiving area and generated from the application TDI credits onto the receiving area. It qualifies for
Well,
low and moderate.
On a conservation subdivision, they figure out how many lots they could do normally. And then they take 10% of that. So, you know, if they had a certain number, then they add 1 or 2 or 3 more. So I would say that would be on top of the
okay.
30 units, yeah.
So now, okay, because we're working in 5-acre increments, and some of the receiving areas can be potentially kind of large, which is kind of why I'm curious about where we're going. Because 30, and then you're at 36, and we're giving them 6, but now because there's 36 units, doesn't 7 of them have to be affordable housing? Because that's the 20% benchmark, and then where does that happen, or how does that work into the calculations? I mean, we're looking at 3.5 acres, and I thought during one of our previous meetings we had discussed the limiting it to a certain building potential, because right now at 3.5 acres of buildable land, you're talking 2 houses. Or 4 acres, it's still 2 houses. And then, although we're saving and we're multiplying from the sending, so sending is already multiplied by 1.5, and the receiving is multiplied by 3, so are we building it a density that is not fitting within?
yeah, I see what you mean, but since it says on page 2 that the residential uses are limited to townhouse dwellings and now condominium dwellings, if we get rid of that number 3, it would just go to, so now you're only
Okay, now we're talking-
about townhouses and
yeah.
condos,
Right.
so it could probably fit.
Do condo units work as individual units on a total lot, Jim? I know that was a struggle with one of the projects that was proposed to us.
So condo units are typically some form of multifamily, whether they're townhouses or like similar to apartments.
Right, but if the property is owned by the condo association, so it has a couple retail, maybe a coffee shop or a Dunkin' Donuts inside of it, and then the rest of the acreage has single-family condominium units in it, is that within the scope of this?
I think it's within the scope of what the committee wants.
I can't hear you.
No, I say, I think it's within the scope of what the committee would want.
Okay.
You know,
Because when I look at this, and she puts the 2 side by side, 2 5-unit townhouses, but let's say you put a Dunkin' Donuts in here, and then you're going to be putting 10, 12 more units behind it? Because we're requiring a minimum of 25%, some form of commercial activity on the property. Or do condos also fall into, like,
well, you can have a commercial condo, which I believe is the case for what Mamma Mia's is. They each have their own individual condo unit, which
Yeah.
is the storefront.
correct?
And then you could have apartments, which are also considered condos.
All right. So,
Or you can also have something similar to a single-family dwelling that could be a condo, because it's, you know, it may be a single unit on a shared piece of land, and then the remaining lot is cared for by the condo association, and then the house and the interior are all maintained by the
okay, so
individual homeowner. or
when we're
property owner.
saying 12 units, including the potential for 10 and 2 affordable units, 3 of those units are going to be required to be commercial, correct?
Where are you reading this from?
I'm looking at that we required a minimum of 25% and a maximum of 66% commercial development. So I'm looking on page 6 where they have 2 5-unit townhouses plus 2 affordable houses, units available,
Right. And
for a
then-
potential of 12. So is that going to be, of that 25% is going to be commercial units, or how does this work here?
Well, I think, well, that's a kind of a decision. I mean, do you want to have all TDR receiving projects to have a commercial element where maybe it's not in the right location for that? You know, say,
Well, we allowed them to separate it, didn't we? Yes, I can see on the next page, on page 8, we allowed them to separate it, and
It's the bottom of page 2.
is the requirement of,
Yes, commercial requirements at the bottom of
Yep.
page 2.
right, so,
yeah,
It's square
thank you.
footage
Okay,
as opposed to number of units, and it can be separate from the residential units.
okay.
But honestly, as we're sitting here talking about this, Mr. Chair, like, I interpret the 3R unit calculation entirely differently than you do. So I think just the simple fact that we've dissected this like 100 times and talked about it so many times, and I'm interpreting it differently than you.
Right,
I think
right.
suggests we need clarifying language, right? Because I think,
Maybe.
I read that to suggest that there's only 10 units, and that the 2 affordable units are 2 of the 10 units. So
Okay,
then-
because that's what I thought
That's how I
also.
interpret it.
And I
And,
was,
and even in the diagram, it references 10 units, 2 5-unit dwellings, right?
okay, so no, that was what I was looking for clarification. So
Yeah.
we are on the same page.
I
yeah.
interpret it that way.
But yes, I think.
As opposed to 12 units.
Yes, okay.
And then the commercial space would be a 25% requirement, 25 to 66% floor area requirement.
Right, yes,
and
yeah.
I think
Okay, yep.
for the, you know, say you're gonna, this gets adopted at town meeting, I think you need that kind of language in there so that someone in the future who comes across this can know what the intent of the people writing it. Because there's a number of bylaws that we run into, and we run into stumbling blocks because we don't know what the original intent of the people drafting the bylaw, what do they intend? And you don't know.
I laugh. I think it's the single biggest issue with the way these bylaws are written a lot of times, is the intent of the person that authored the bylaw isn't
Right.
known 20 years later, and you shouldn't need a slide rule to understand what somebody meant 20 years ago.
Exactly,
Right,
because I
right.
see both of these are side by side, the two charts on 6 and 7.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's where my confusion was coming in with the exceptional housing needs overages and
So for example, you know, if you read through this, okay, well, what's the base density? And then are you allowed to add to that base number of units for the, whatever the additional credits are? And then how do you determine, you know, say it's let's just say it's on Route 58 and it's a place that would probably be a good, you know, you have a good building where you would have some commercial on it, and then, but on the back of it, it may have some extra land where you could potentially put housing. So how do you divvy out what's commercial and then what's housing? That's kind of one area. But then what's the base? So you have to do the NULA, which calculates, you know, kind of a base density. But then how many extra units are you going to add on to it? All right, because you have to, whatever the base density of the develop, you know, the underlying zoning is, and then you're sending credits to another area. how do you incentivize someone to use that program to add whatever the units are? And I guess that's kind of one of the things I'm struggling with, is trying to
Well,
wrap my head around that.
if I may, Mr. Chair, maybe.
Please.
Maybe there should be somewhere in this little section, just a phrase that says, it does say maximum development potential is 10 units.
Yep.
Mhm.
But then I think it should say, and of those 10, 8 are market rate and 2 should be.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Real.
That's fine,
Right.
because we get into the next example of 27AB where we add 3 more houses onto it because they are age restricted and affordable, and then it's up to, well, it's up to 13 unit, well, this says townhouse buildings, but I expect it could be considered units.
I think we should also, to Sarah's point, in that section, in that example, under 3R, it should clearly state in there that 3 of those 10 units have to be commercial. Because you really only got 7 residential units if 25% has to be commercial. There's at least 3 units of that 10 that have to be commercial.
Right, and then...
Or not units, but the square footage, right?
Right.
If they're all equally sized, then 3 of them
And then
have to be commercial.
affordable housing only falls under the amount of houses that are actually built and commercial shouldn't fall into that calculation, so,
So 3 units commercial, 5 market rate, right? And
Well,
2 affordable.
if it's 3 commercial units, then you're left with 7 times 2, 1.5, which rounds down to 1, so then you're only looking at the requirement for 1 affordable housing unit. So you could go 6, 1, and 3 would be the calculation on
We should
that.
probably keep it percentage though, just so that it's really clear, because I don't want somebody sitting around having.
Right, but, all right, 7 or 0.7 as the case may be, as 10% multiplied by 2 is only 1.4, and that would be rounded down to 1 unit. So it would be 6 market rate, 1 affordable, and 3 commercial.
Right.
That's, yeah, I was just suggesting.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Because it's 20% of the housing units.
Of the housing unit, yes,
Yep.
20%. So we should add that.
I think that should sort of be outlined in that example.
Yeah, so we need to clarify that.
So this is.
And again, that's assuming they're all equally sized, square footage wise, because it's a square footage calculation, not a unit calculation. But
Right.
theoretically, you could have 1 commercial unit of the 10. Of the 10 available units, you could have 1 that's commercial, as long as that commercial unit is large enough.
Comprises 25, up to 20, from more than 20, 25% or more than.
Right.
Okay.
So that's where it'll get creative, right? Is you'll have the largest Dunkin' Donuts in Massachusetts to accommodate 9 housing units.
Right. Well, Dunkin' Donuts probably wouldn't complain about it.
So
So-
it gets this is where the nuance of the bylaw comes in. But I do think that there should be some indication about 10 potential units minus the commercial requirement. Something along those lines. It doesn't have to spell out units, so to speak, but
Okay, excellent. Yeah,
yeah, it
that's
should
an
spell out
excellent idea.
10 units comprising of also the minimum commercial requirement of 25%.
So if you break down percentages, it's 25% is commercial, 55% is market rate, and 20% is affordable. That way you
Yes.
raise the numbers, so it could apply to any property.
Okay.
Theoretically, because the 25% is based on square footage, not number of units.
Right, yeah.
So you said 25% commercial, 55% market rate
And 20%
housing.
And 20% affordable.
Market.
How is this going to work with where these units are placed? I mean, currently now, the housing units are on the 2nd floor, and the commercial are down.
We're not requiring it. We're not requiring
So
that.
this, what we're doing here, the housing units could be on the 1st floor, or commercial on the 2nd floor?
Well, all commercial
or-
is required to be on the 1st floor, but it's not necessarily required to be in the same building. So if you have a building with mixed commercial and residential, then we required commercial to be on the 1st floor. But you can have a standalone commercial business, like a Dunkin'
Okay,
Donuts.
yeah.
And then you could have, like, behind Mamma Mia's there, that little, it's a little roadway that goes
Chance
back.
Court?
Chance Court
Yeah.
that goes back to those houses, that nice little,
Duplexes,
that's
yeah.
a nice
Yeah.
little
It
development
is.
back there. It's very attractive.
Yep.
And it would work that way, because we didn't want to restrict it to only
Okay.
singular building development, I
Right.
think, because in the town like this, I think that type of development is important to maintaining the rural characteristics.
Yes, no, yeah, that is, I mean, that's good.
Otherwise, people are gonna start throwing up 3, 4-story mixed-use department, commercial, wherever they can.
Well, the fire department has to look at how
Right.
high you can go.
But they can try.
Right, well,
Because they will.
we're at 35 feet, that's 3.5 stories, right? So. All right, so,
So we do have Fran Mello joining us on Zoom. Fran, can you hear us?
Mr. Chair, thanks for that last input, kind of cleared some up, even myself, I'm saying 20% of 10 units and you're adding 2 units.
Yeah.
I was a little
Not clear
confused.
enough.
Right. Plus, it didn't take into consideration the fact that there's commercial,
We can turn that down, can't we? I
and
mean,
then,
it's-
But the last discussion kind of clarified it.
yeah.
Myself, I felt comfortable in that discussion
Fran, can you hear us?
than previous.
So, all right. So do we add a little blurb in here, a star, or, I see,
It's convoluted and confusing.
I know, but I think just a little box that explains it, because the explanation box on here with 2 5-unit townhouses makes it a little, does make it confusing. If we took that out, could we change it to something that said 25% commercial, 55% market, 20% affordable, and say that would put 25% commercial, and are we rounding up or down?
I think that calculation's confusing though.
It is,
honestly.
because it's half
Well, 'cause it's
percentages.
Well, because one is percentages and the other one's number of units.
Well, you could use the number of units but
To
you could
base it,
show the calculation in percent.
For-
percentage.
well-
Because that applies to everyone, but then you say this is an example just for this particular property.
right, if we took out this little thing here and put, for example, 3 commercial units, it would work down to 1, so 6 market and 1 affordable.
Yeah, yes, I think as long
As
as
an
you want
example.
to use the numbers, you also have to have the percentages. So that whoever's doing their own property can see, well, I have 10 acres, so numbers are going to be different, but I have to use the same percentages.
But the percentages aren't the same.
Okay. So it's 25% commercial.
But that's floor area, it's not number of units. So if I had 20 units, I don't need 5 of them to be commercial. I could make 1 big unit, and the other 19 could be housing units. That's why the percentages don't apply.
So the percentages by the total area.
No.
That's what it looks like here.
The percentages for commercial apply to the total area of the development,
Well,
yes.
this step 3R is also using percentages as a multiplier, so
But that's percentages as a number of units, as a multiplier.
So maybe for any receiving area development of 5 or more residential units.
But it's saying 20% of the housing units, not 20% of the land of the floor area within the housing units, right? It's saying 20% of the units, the number of units, not
Right.
floor area. Whereas the commercial requirement refers strictly to 25% of the total development floor area. So if you have 20 units, but one of them is commercial, and let's say it's a 10,000 square foot building, that might satisfy the requirement. The other 19 can be housing units. Then 20% of those 19 have to be affordable.
Correct. That's how I'm looking at it, but I don't know how to.
So that 20, 55, the 25, 55, 20 wouldn't apply to that development. 55% of them are not housing, are not,
Right.
whatever we referred to the phrase as, moderate housing or whatever. Market housing, yes.
So this
It's a much
does,
higher percentage for that development.
on the plus side, a minimum of 20% of the housing units constructed in a receiving area shall qualify as affordable. So it is, we are limiting it to the 20% based on, so if they had a commercial area, and maybe they only wanted to put, as an example, I'm gonna use Agway. Maybe instead of the two buildings, they had put their major building out front, and the gentleman just wanted to own his own house out back, right? That would, I wouldn't see that would qualify in any sense of the word for affordable housing requirements, though. Or a duplex, because we only require 5 or more, right? So that the larger the commercial, then you're looking at less residential.
5 or more?
It's, yeah, for any receiving area development of 5 or more units, a minimum of 20% of the housing units. So for every 5, 1.
Right. Okay.
Because if we want to look at it on an absurd level, right? If I had a 10 acre, let's say a 10 acre parcel, and a 4 acre parcel, I could build a Shaw's for one of the units, and then out behind it build 9 houses. Under this scenario. Because the Shaw's is gonna satisfy my commercial requirement.
It is going to satisfy your commercial requirement, but on 4 acres of land, because of the requirements for the health department and
Of course.
the building department.
I'm just saying a large commercial structure like a Shaw's, right? You're
Yeah.
gonna put that out front, you can then put 9 housing units out back.
Well, you,
And only one of those has to be affordable, right? Because you round down to be 1.8, and so one unit has to be affordable. So I'm gonna have 8 market units and 1 affordable unit. Yet between 25 and 66% of my floor area in those 10 units is commercial, because it's the Shaw's, the grocery store,
Right.
what have you.
So
Well,
we're using different.
Correct.
Well,
Different
the thing-
qualifiers.
The thing is, you're only,
Correct.
you are
Correct.
only allowed to develop 60% of any commercial property. So if you put a large commercial development on that, then 40% of that property still has to remain in this town so you'd be working with a very limited ability to put any sort of structures on after a fairly large development like that. Because you're looking at 10, let's say they're 15,000, so you'd end up with maybe, if you had a 10,000 square foot building out front, which is actually very small
Very small.
retail.
Yep.
Then that would only leave you the ability to put up maybe 5,000 square foot units on the property without encroaching upon the 40% requirement. So it would be a townhouse.
Yeah, you could do maybe 4 units or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So I think that's all, I don't see the issue. It's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
It is only an example.
Right, but yeah, for instance, if we look at this, the 2 5-unit townhomes in the example, then you're looking at, say that's a retail space, one of them's a retail space, and then you're looking at the other 5, and then you're looking at 1 required affordable housing for that 4 acres. And then you gotta deal with the septic issues and drainage for parking and a variety of other issues.
Yeah, because the commercial use is gonna dictate a lot of that stuff too. So if it's a restaurant, it's gonna have different requirements than a office space.
So do we put in a little do we take out the 2 5-unit townhomes chart and put in?
My personal opinion is that the 4 acre parcel diagram isn't all that helpful. Others might disagree. I think that 4 acre diagram isn't that helpful. But I think we should have some language in there that, like Sarah alluded to, that the 2 affordable units are part of the 10 units, right? And then in that box somewhere, allude to And a portion of the 10 units will have to meet the commercial requirement of 25 to 66%. You have to spell out what it is, so much as highlighted in the example that a portion of the 10 units will have to be the commercial requirement of 25 to 66%.
All right, so,
Yeah, I think as long as it's really spelled out clearly.
Yep.
And just say, 20% is affordable. In this particular example, that means 1 unit, or whatever it is. Because it can be confusing if you look at it and see 2 affordable units, people are gonna just think, well, it doesn't apply to every property, in other words. So you need the percentages, the floor space, and saying, okay, and these are the numbers that it goes out, given this particular,
Because,
yeah.
because the size of that commercial space is going to dictate how many affordable units you need,
Yeah.
like you were saying, because there's lot restrictions on how much square footage you can have on a lot.
right.
So that too is going to dictate how many units you can have.
I know Jim's dealing with one of those issues nowadays.
So, I mean, each one of these developments are gonna have to be looked at individually.
Individually,
And
Maybe there should be like a
Jim-
mixed-use formula and then
Yeah.
a straight residential formula.
Yeah, maybe that's the best way to do it.
So then you break it out, it's okay, we're gonna have, in certain receiving areas, these are intended to be mixed-use projects, and here's a formula to do that. And then, areas where the intent is to have residential, then you have a formula for that area.
But we have no strictly residential on our receiving. Everything in the receiving areas is commercial or urban. Well, we can call it urban now because we have an urban development in our town, so commercial or
Yeah, but
urban.
residential is underlying zoning.
Residential, yeah.
Yeah,
So it can be residential, but part of the purpose is of this is not to lose commercial space because it's so limited in this town.
No, I know.
That's why the residents pick up, what, 72% of,
No,
all the
I
costs of-
understand that
yeah.
Totally, but you were saying there aren't any lots where it was totally supposed to be residential, and I'm saying, well, they could be.
well, yes,
That's the underlying
yes.
zone.
But we don't want to trade off commercial taxes and development for tax negative residential development that's gonna cost the town, when this is supposed to be beneficial to the town and its
And I
residents.
believe me, I
So
totally agree with you on that.
that's the balance point we gotta try and
However,
reach.
the point is that you can do residential because of, that's the way it works. So I'd rather, if we're gonna have, if some property owner has a property and they don't wanna put commercial there, then at least the clustered residential development is there, and it's not somewhere down in, South Carver or wherever it is.
Right, well, then they have conservation subdivisions and a variety of other routes they can go outside of the TDRs, I think. I think it's very difficult,
I understand,
yeah.
I'm just saying that you could get an example of someone doing that.
Sure.
Okay, at least it's better than having
Well,
someone
they did it right across the street here, yeah, and that was the choice they made.
Because to me, I think what you're alluding to, I brought it up at a prior meeting, because to me it's confusing in section B there on page 2, back to where the multifamily dwellings discussion was. Because if I'm understanding you correctly, Mr. Chair, and this is how I understand it, every TDR receiving area must be mixed use. Correct?
It doesn't read that way.
Yeah, well, that doesn't read that way, but. with
That's the intent, right,
with the
that you're
20
alluding to?
Well, with the 25% requirement, that is part of the intent, yeah.
Right, so to me, it's confusing to have the uses permitted on receiving parcels as residential, commercial, and mixed use, because theoretically, the use on every parcel is mixed use. It's okay to define residential as townhouse and
Right,
condominium.
You're saying that that's just too much, it's just offering,
To me, it confuses it, because it makes it look like you can do a strictly residential development on a receiving parcel, or a strictly commercial development on a parcel, or a mixed use. But yet,
I-
section C then says you're required to do
Right.
commercial, which makes
I-
everything mixed
I
use.
see what you're saying. Mixed-use buildings.
Theoretically,
All right,
you
so
want
it
to, you
actually-
sort of want to define the allowable residential as townhouse and condominium, but the uses are not, certain residential uses, it says it's limited to this, but essentially every receiving parcel has to be mixed use, the way this is written.
Well, yes, but it's not necessarily a mixed-use building. So a mixed-use building would contain both commercial and residential, whereas otherwise you could have a commercial building, and then again, out back, you could have residential townhouses or condominium units.
Yeah. I see your point, Adam, but I think.
I do see your point.
Connie's right too, because, yeah.
Yeah, the buildings that, like, the uses permitted on receiving parcels as it relates to buildings can be residential, commercial, or mixed use, but the parcels themselves cannot. And the use of the entire parcel cannot. To me, it's too confusing. I totally understand, I think I understand what you're saying, I'm not going to assume I do.
No,
But I think I understand exactly what you're saying in the sense that the individual buildings can be strictly residential.
Right.
Strictly commercial,
Yeah.
or mixed use.
because you might not want your Dunkin' Donuts or in that.
Right.
It's a terrible example.
No, but it makes sense. The structure could be that way. But to me, when I read this, and I'm not a developer, but if I was to read this, I would say, all right, yeah, I can do my receiving parcel can be all residential units. And then C sort of contradicts that, so.
So maybe you should pull out, and in case Fran doesn't know what we're talking about here, we're on page 2, section 27XX, part B. Maybe we should pull out that mixed-use buildings with residential and commercial uses and say, leave the uses above as residential and commercial, and then have a separate section that talks about the buildings. I don't know if that was very helpful.
So that you can do townhouse and condominium
Right,
or commercial,
right.
But then there's the
or a
20,
mix.
Or a
right.
mix, right.
So, yeah,
And maybe,
I mean,
maybe
that's the way I
honestly,
take it.
maybe honestly, it's as simple as saying, instead of uses permitted, it should be buildings permitted on receiving
Okay,
parcels.
yeah.
Because it's not,
Certain residential units.
because the buildings permitted on the receiving parcels could be residential uses of townhouse or condominium, or they could be commercial, or they could be mixed buildings.
Well, that's the way it reads now.
But it says uses, right? So uses permitted on the receiving parcel can be any one of those three, but it can't be residential. It has to be mixed use.
No,
I don't see that.
why are you saying it has to be a mixed
Yeah.
use?
Because
That's
every,
not what it says.
every receiving parcel has to have 25% commercial floor area. So every single receiving
This
parcel
says
is gonna be a
the
mixed
receiving
use.
parcel mixed use commercial space requirement
Yeah,
is 25%. It doesn't say every parcel has to be mixed use.
What it's saying is that the receiving parcel, mixed use requirement is 25%, meaning every parcel
Yeah.
has to have 25%
In each.
commercial development.
In each
No, no.
receiving area
It
development.
says mixed use, sorry.
Nope.
Section C says receiving parcel mixed use commercial space.
Yeah, but the
requirement is.
next sentence is, in each receiving area development, a minimum of 25% and a maximum of 66% of all new constructed floor space must consist of commercial
Okay.
space. So there is a commercial requirement to it.
is that something that we
So-
intended to do, or?
I believe it was. It
Or
was,
do
it was
you-
a fairly long conversation that day. But maybe we change his uses to units in section B. Units permitted on, so certain residential units, commercial units, mixed-use buildings
I think that would suffice.
with, so, all right.
Yep.
If that's really what we intended.
Yeah, and then maybe, to your point, Sarah, right, maybe we have one more discussion in depth about
Yeah,
this,
I think
this
so, yeah,
requirement
yeah.
and really analyze whether we want that or not.
Because I never took it to be that way. I thought that we could do reading this, townhouse, condominiums, or commercial, or a mixture.
Yeah.
That's the way I took it, because, I mean, you have a parcel, say, in South Carver, that's a sending area, you want to keep that for conservation or whatever. And so you send in, instead of that, you know, it would be single-family homes or whatever, and you send that over so you can do a townhouse or a condominium some
Right,
other
that's the way
place. That's the way, you know, I never really thought about this that much, about commercial development. I mean, that's something that I never really thought of too much, but,
I think to the chairs, like, to Connie's point, we did discuss this quite a bit at a prior meeting, because my initial thought was, I didn't want the commercial requirement. And it wasn't until you raised the point that, like, if you're building 20 duplexes on the lot, you know, on a what is now a commercial lot, you're removing the commercial development capability of the town for the foreseeable future, right? Because they could always tear down those units in 50 years and build a commercial dwelling there. But you're taking away the commercial development potential of the town, and we as a town have touched upon the fact that we think some good, responsible commercial development is of a benefit to the town, and we don't necessarily want to take that away. So I didn't see it that way, and I actually didn't agree with that thought process until you raised that concern, and I think it has some validity,
Well,
but
if
we
you
have discussed it.
Look at the market the way it is today. All this commercial space would have made the developers a lot of money just by coming in and putting 10 and 20 unit condos in here and then walking away. And then where would the town be? Then you're looking at 100% of the cost of all services in the town, which are going to go up because of the amount of units, is going to be burdened by the residents of this town. And that's difficult for me to, you know, get behind on.
Yeah,
these.
I think it was a great point by you, because I didn't see it that way, honestly, and I liked the idea of a 50-unit residential development. I thought it would be great.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think if you're putting that on something that's zoned commercial and is intended to be commercial, it does rob us a little bit of some commercial development potential that is a benefit to the town, right?
Yeah.
We don't want a 400-unit development on the urban renewal site, right, the Route 44 development project. We don't want somebody going in and putting 400 residential units in there.
No, right.
Because of this
Which-
TDR bylaw allows it, and
right.
they don't have a tenant for a warehouse anymore, type of thing.
yeah, it's true.
All right,
So,
well,
That should be, so we really should make that really clear.
so,
I-
yes.
yeah, I agree.
So we do have a little homework to do, but I can see,
We have
I
a
can
school
see we're
committee-
running very short on time here.
Right, they want to
So-
get set up for their meeting tonight.
We'll discuss the uses to units changes, and we'll come up with a appropriate, maybe change the example on the previous page of 6, where it says 2 10-unit townhouses. Maybe we can work with that a little bit, but we'll have a little homework in regards to that. But
I think those are all healthy changes.
No, I think what we did
Nope.
this afternoon was good.
we
I'm
caught
gonna
a
ask
couple good
the
things,
kind
yeah.
of crazy question.
Yep, oh, please, there's no,
Given the complexity of this thing, you know, does the towns, you know, the town, you know, the residents of the town on this committee want to continue with going through a TDR bylaw?
I think it's
Is-
important. I think it's one of the opportunities for our town to save and rather than lose to development. And as we've seen this past year with the increase of housing costs, housing sales and everything like that, any opportunity to build a house anywhere that it can fit in. And having sat on the planning board, we've seen a few unique plans come before us in regards to that, trying to squeeze things in where they don't belong, you know, so I think, if nothing else, offering it out there, maybe people won't like it, but from what I see, our numbers are better than most of the surrounding towns in the area as far as what we're willing to give for what we're willing to save. I think those numbers are very good. I believe Falmouth is 1 for 1, and we're 3 for 1. And that's a hard one, and Falmouth is getting built all the way up. But we'll leave that discussion for next time.
Okay.
May I ask a quick question?
Please do, Chuck.
When we started the conversation, you had the interpretation that 20% on the 10 units would make it 12 units. We kind of straightened that out, but how did you derive that at the beginning?
Because the next chart is showing that if we allow age-restricted affordable housing, then we're bumping it up to 13 units, and I was concerned that that's what we were doing
But
with
we're not
the...
gonna use that interpretation, we're gonna go back to 20% of 10 is 2.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
it's-
20% of 10 is 2, but it actually will work out to 1 because
Oh,
of the
okay.
commercial requirement.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Question, Mr. Chair, did you want to approve the minutes tonight?
I wanted to get to that before
Okay.
we step down here, so I will accept the motion to approve the minutes of 6/14/2021.
I'll make that motion.
I will second the motion.
I don't, Mr. Chair, I have not had a chance to look at them. Could we table them to next time?
Well, I suppose I'd have to go by vote now that's been motioned and seconded. I might be mistaken on that.
Well, it's all good withdraw the motion. I'm sorry to do that to you. I meant to get to it.
Okay, well, we can give you a minute, if it's all right with you. I think we got...
We're not on for another 35 minutes.
Oh, yeah, so we got a couple minutes here. So we'll take a couple minutes here. Jim, while we're in a pause here, what were you thinking would be a good date for our next meeting?
I know I got a,
Roughly 30 days?
excuse me?
Oh, we can't do it. That would be Columbus Indigenous People Day. I'm not,
Oh, I didn't bring my
I think that's around that.
calendars with me.
16. Calendar thing.
Because we do have, I'd like to do it after the planning board meeting on the 12th. The week after. Would say like
Not after the planning board meeting, right?
No, not immediately, the week after the planning board meeting.
All right, that
Um,
sounds really good to me.
Like, I believe that's the 18th, October 18th.
I believe so, yeah.
So that'll be on a Tuesday.
No, Monday.
It's on a Monday?
Yeah.
Where are we?
Okay, oh yeah, we're doing this on a Monday, okay.
October 18, so. Yeah, it's 5 PM. 5 PM still works for everybody.
And we'll send out the same email?
With all the same material.
Yeah, okay. And I think Sarah's gonna send us a little information in regards to sending areas also.
Who took the minutes? Was that you, Jim?
No, that was
Tiffany.
Tiffany Sadek.
Oh, okay. So whoever that is mentions I would like to see changes. Is that referring to whoever was the previous speaker?
Oh, okay.
You just, it's a
Um,
little confusing.
Unfortunately, she's on leave now.
So who was taking the minutes for today?
I am.
Oh,
And the tape.
right. previous meeting, June 14th?
I believe.
Yeah, that
it
was,
was.
yep, the last meeting that we had.
And we were just introduced to Helen's in Cottage.
No, I introduced Helen and Bill in every meeting, but Tiffany doesn't take all the minutes for every meeting,
Oh,
so.
okay. Yeah. So Helen does mention that the only concern would be the map itself. She didn't send me the minute. So I will get that to you. And then
Sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, the only question I would have would be on page 1, that paragraph, where I asked a question, and I don't see that it was answered. I just don't remember whether it was an answer or, and it's left out.
This will discourage people from keeping their receiving areas. I'd have to go review the meeting.
Yeah, and that's how she did it. She did it from the video.
Yeah, I think,
And so
So
maybe
I
it's,
suspect that
she is.
the chair's comment after yours was maybe an attempt to answer that question, and that there wasn't any, specific answer to your question, I suspect.
Tiffany's very specific when it comes to taking notes, but I'd have to go back and check.
Because she could have paused the video and like, it wouldn't have been something that she would have missed, I wouldn't think. I think that's why she wrote "I" and things like that, is because she was following along with the video.
Yeah, I didn't notice that should be in quotes.
Well, I know it seems picky, but if something isn't in the minutes, then it didn't happen. That's what we've been told by council,
Yeah.
so I kind of think maybe we
Okay.
should find out
All
what
right.
happened.
I will do that, so.
Do you want to withdraw your motion?
All right, so I'll withdraw the motion to approve the minutes of 6/14/2021. And, see, I guess we'll have make a motion to table the minutes until our next meeting.
I'll second that table.
Any further discussion?
Adam Holmes says aye.
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Cornelius, aye.
Sarah Hill says aye.
Chuck Carver says aye.
Do we still have somebody on,
nope, gone.
No, Fran.
okay.
Fran's gone. All right, so, she wasn't there. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and have a good evening.
Oh, motion to adjourn. Oh, you made it second?
All right,
Adam Holmes says aye.
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Cornelius Shea says aye.
Sarah Hill says aye.
Chuck Carver says aye.
Thank you, everyone.